Can we be real for 1 minute? Say how we feel for 1 minute.
Hello, everybody. We want to welcome you to another episode of Real Love with Lonnie and
Kara.
Yes, we're so glad to have you here. We're thankful that you guys chose to join us for another episode of just open and honest conversation. This episode is brought to you by our dear friends over at the Skin Deep. Go to skindeep.com to get your deck of the couples edition. There are different variations, of course. There's a family edition. There's one for singles, for dating. These are very fun cards, and I think maybe during this episode we'll go through some of these and just kind of have a little fun with them. And so thank you again for joining us. Again, this is a real conversation. It's unscripted, so we're just going to have an open dialogue and just talk about our experiences in love, marriage, and life. And so we're so glad to have you. And before we get started, though, I do want to mention that we want to invite you guys to go to all the podcast platforms, because our podcast is now available on anywhere you can actually find podcasts. Cool. That's Real Love with Lonnie and Kara. So let's dive right into it. I know I never ever tell Kara what we're going to talk about. So the concept or topic that came across my mind today is boundaries. Boundaries in relationships. In fact, I'll take it a step further. There is also a necessity to have boundaries even in marriage. Yeah,
I would agree.
A lot of people would disagree with that, but there are boundaries that are needed in marriage as well. Boundaries is not just for dating. Boundaries is not just for friendships. Obviously, boundaries is necessary for any type of relationship that you can be involved in. And so I want to talk about the concept of boundaries in relationships, but most of all, boundaries in marriage. And I know probably some of you are out there thinking, what does that look like to have boundaries in marriage? So I'm glad you asked. And we're going to talk about that today. And so before we dive deep into the conversation, Kara, kind of give me your idea or your perspective on the necessity of boundaries and what actually you would describe boundaries to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first off, I never know what our topic is going to be. So I think you do that intentionally. So I'm not prepared.
Yes, exactly.
And so for those of you, if you don't know me, I am probably more of a structured type of girl, and he is, he's a little bit more fluid and flexible in that space. So anyway, the necessities of boundaries, obviously it's needed. I think in any type of relationship, you need to have respectable boundaries so that you can ensure that you are being mutually you're respecting each other, you are creating space for each other, you are making sure that you are recognizing each other, any of those things. I think to be successful in any relationship, you've got to be able to communicate those boundaries and be able to be comfortable of sharing what your boundaries are, especially if there are some non-negotiable boundary lines, right?
Yes, I agree.
So I think that's the necessity, I think, of a part of the necessity of having boundaries. What was the second part of that question?
Well, give me what your definition of boundaries is. And once again, just disregard the dog Santana and Blue. I think they're just gonna be part of the podcast. Because you saw them for the first episode, and they just, no matter what location we're in, obviously they have no boundaries. This is an example of sometimes when they don't understand the boundaries, they will cross the boundaries. Right. And so this is a prime example when they don't know boundaries. This is what happens. Right. So for those of you who are watching, obviously you see this is Santana. He's a Rottweiler. You would think he's the boss,
but he's not.
But the smaller dog, which is Blue, he is the bossy dog of the bunch. So Santana's a big old baby, but at the same time, if you happen to come in unnoticed, you probably want to be careful.
You won't probably leave.
Yeah, exactly.
In one piece.
Right. All right.
So anyway,
describe what's your definition of boundaries is.
Definition of boundaries to me is potentially safeguards or limitations that you'll place or you'll put up to ensure that in the context of a marriage or a relationship is so either those imaginary lines or those defined lines that you put up to ensure that you are safe, to ensure that you are heard, to ensure that you are seen, to ensure that you are valued and respected. And so they could be defined lines or the boundaries that you can see etched out, or those unsaid boundary lines that have just out of common courtesy.
Okay. All right. Well, I would definitely agree with that definition of boundaries. Now, one thing I would add to that is boundaries is not necessarily imaginary lines, but boundaries are the where you draw the line and say, hey, look, this is as far as I'm going to go. This is as far as I want to allow you to disrespect me. This is as far as I'm going to allow you to cut me off during a conversation. This is as far as I'm going to allow you to just be inconsiderate of me and my time and so forth. And so a lot of people think boundaries are only for the courtship phase of relationships, a dating phase of relationships, but boundaries are necessary even in marriage, contrary to popular belief. Let's do this though. Let's kind of give a practical idea of what boundaries would look like in marriage. Now, for those of you that don't know, Kara and I are walking up on 29 years of marriage. This year in November. It'll be our 29th year of marriage. And believe it or not, we have had to set boundaries for one another, even though we are married. So boundaries are necessary even in marriage. So let's kind of give them a practical look of what boundaries look like in marriage. I'll let you kind of dive in first, and I'll tag along after you. Just share what it would look. What does it look like for boundaries in marriage?
So
give me some practical ideas.
Well, I'll give you a practical. We are, as Lonnie said, we are entering into that 29th year. We're in the 29th year, right? Or getting there. And practical boundary, and this may be a funny one, is we have to know when we have gone too far. And when I say is, Lonnie he can be a jokester sometimes, and he can be Mr. Funny Man and say things that's like, okay. And there are times where like, okay, that's enough. That is no longer funny. It was funny the first time, but now you're badgering, you're being a heckler, you're just being obnoxious now, and it's no longer funny. And so real world example is that sometimes I'll have to say, okay, that's enough. Or he'll just, and I'm like, okay, it's no longer being funny. Now you're being offensive, or now you're actually hurting my feelings. I thought it was funny the first time, but now we're on the 50th time and the same punchline is no longer funny. And so a boundary right there would be is, hey, I have to communicate. Okay, that's enough. Yeah. You're just doing the most. That's too much. And so funny part of that, we've created, because we know that's a boundary, or we've established that as a boundary, like, hey, when one of us say that's enough, you got to respect that, right? But in funny settings, we can be in various settings where we're in a group setting and different people, and if we don't say what that is, the other person can keep on going. So we've created a word that we have agreed upon, and the word is daffodils.
I wanted a different word, but yeah, we stuck with daffodils because it would be kind of funny to be around people, and all of a sudden, Kara blurts out saying daffodils, and people looking like,
what does that mean?
I know what it means, but everybody else doesn't.
He knows what it means, but nobody else knows it. But now anyone that's listening to the pod will understand when you hear me in us settings, I'm saying daffodils, he's taking it too far. And I think it's a matter of, I could have easily say, okay, Lonnie, that's enough. That's enough. Then everybody's like, okay, what's going on with them? So what we've landed on is saying whenever each one of us or either one of us says the word daffodils, that means that's enough. Right. Boundary has crossed, you need to stop. Now, if the person keeps on going, like so in this same example, like can just keep on going, I'm like, okay, you're not on stand up, this is enough. And and I say daffodils and he just disregards the words, then at that point I know you're now being intentionally trying to cross over the boundary and you really don't have respect for my boundary here.
Yeah, that's a really good example of boundaries, and that's a real life
That's real
example. But Kara did not include the fact that I'm not the only one that can be obnoxious. Sometimes Kara, y'all think Kara is like Miss Oh so nice, but behind the scenes, Kara is just over the top. I mean, okay, I just ignore her though. I just act like I don't even say that. No, don't daffodil me right now. No. The problem is, in private, she can go too far, and I just act like she ain't there, and that irritates her. But at the same time, if I don't ignore her, she'll keep on. Yeah, so Kara can be obnoxious as well. So, but I digress.
Yeah.
I would say another practical example of boundaries in marriage would be, for example, I have gotten to a place where whenever I've had a long day, I'm out working, doing whatever. When I come home, I have settings on my phone that as soon as I get home, it automatically goes to do not disturb. Automatically.
Yeah.
So that whenever I get home, I'm not hearing notifications of text messages, or emails, or anything like that. So it's set to only the kids and Kara can get through. If a phone call comes through, I won't hear it. It'll go straight to voicemail. And the way my voicemail is set up is, and a lot of people criticize me about it, but it is what it is. Hey, you've reached the right person, just the wrong time. Please leave a message after the tone, and I'll get back with you. If you do not leave a message, I will not call you back. And I mean that, because sometimes people call just to shoot the breeze, and I don't always like to shoot the breeze. And so people will call. If they don't leave a voicemail, I won't call back. Or they can text me and let me know what it is. But that's a boundary that I have set in place to eliminate any distractions so that when I'm at home, I can give my full undivided attention. I have my notifications turned off, even for social media. I don't know when I have a DM. I don't know when I have a comment. I don't have any notifications pop up. And in fact, it's gotten to the point that it's irritating. And I'm just being honest. It's irritating when I hear my text notification now. That's why I turn it off. Sometimes I'll get a group message. Kara will respond in the group message, and I hear her notification. I'm like, oh my gosh. But that's a boundary that I have set in place. When I get home, my phone immediately goes to do not disturb. Automatically, without fail. And so I've kept that boundary for a long time because it gives me a sense of control of who I want to talk to or who I don't want to talk to. And it also allows me to have my undivided attention and time with Kara.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think another boundary in marriage is important is boundaries that you agree upon with family members or relatives or friends. So I think early on in our marriage, we had established boundaries even on like traveling for holidays, right? Or expectations. And so for years we've lived away from family. And so early on we had to try to figure out, okay, rotating of whose house, whose family are we going to go visit? Are we going to visit, both of our families are in Oklahoma. So are we going to go to Muskogee where Lonnie's family is? Are we going to go to Tulsa where my family is? Even though it's about 30 minutes away, we've never lived that close. Now we live pretty close being in the Dallas area. But before probably the closest we lived was like 6 hours away when we lived outside of St. Louis, or when we lived closer to the Chicago area, we were, 9 hours plus. And so we had to establish boundaries even with family of like, okay, when are we going to, the expectations of we're coming here for Thanksgiving, are we going there for Christmas, are we going here? And so we had to, I think that's a way too is practical in when you have family and friends, it's important to establish boundaries there. Especially when family may be dependent upon or they're expecting. And so you never want their expectations or their needs or their wants to have more prioritization over your commitment to each other. So I think that's important is practical is when you're traveling with that. I think is also another boundary I think about is just work, and so I think about in any relationship or just marriage, work, depending on how you're prioritizing, if you don't have healthy boundaries there, it can have an impact on your relationship too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And one thing that I have made a point to do, I don't bring work home.
Yeah.
There are times whenever I'm working up in the studio, I'll close the door, I'm locked in. I'm talking locked in for hours. But whenever I'm done, I'm done. I don't like talking about work. I like separating work from personal. Even when I'm talking with friends, I don't talk about work. I don't talk about work. I don't like talking about work because work is work, and then personal life is personal life.
Yeah.
And so that is a good rule of thumb to have. So.
And I think part of that too, with even in 2020 when COVID hit and things shut down, I think marriage, the boundaries there was really tested.
You're
because
right.
some people were working from home, and so there was never a separation of that, right? Or even when we even experienced when in 2020 when we both were at home when things were just very still and our employers were saying, hey, we're not opening up, and so you're on like a COVID leave or whatever. And so I think boundaries were really tested even then when you didn't have a separation of things, you didn't have established things, you just had you had a lot of assumptions of things, and so marriages and just specifically relationships were really tested during those times, especially when boundaries were really never established, but boundaries were tested.
Yes, yeah, that's true. And now that you mentioned about COVID, COVID really proved or tested the love and commitment to marriages and relationships.
So true.
And so by the grace of God, we made it through, but there was, a lot of relationships that didn't last through COVID.
Yeah.
The And, Couples Edition by The Skin Deep. The And is a card game with intimate and thought-provoking questions that help embrace vulnerability and deeper conversations for couples. Visit theskindeep.com to purchase your deck today. And because you tune into the podcast, you can receive 10% off your entire purchase just by using the promo code RELATIONSHIPS. That's right, the promo code RELATIONSHIPS. Visit theskindeep.com and tell them Lonnie and Kara sent you.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to dive into the Couples Edition, which is a really cool card game for couples. Kara has a couple of cards out. You're not supposed to look at them.
Oh.
So we got to start over. No.
Okay.
Shuffle these and put those back.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, are these mine? Yep, shuffle.
All right. So
I'll pick 3, you pick 3.
No, well, for the sake of time, you pick 2 and I pick 2.
Got it.
Okay. All right. So I'll read mine first.
Okay.
I already read this one. Okay, here we go. What does marriage mean to you?
Marriage means covenant, means commitment, means love, respect, sacrificial love.
Okay. Your turn.
My turn. What do you think I want from life?
What do I get if I'm right?
See? Okay. I was waiting for this.
Oh
Every game we play, he always has to have some type of prize. Not just we're just doing it out of fun. He never fails. He's got to have something out of it.
Okay, but this
was his idea, right?
Okay, all right. Well, this is not a game. This is like questions.
Yeah, so there's no I get nothing out of.
Okay.
You just
All right, okay.
You need me to read it again?
No, I don't need you to read it again.
Okay.
The question is, what do I think you want out of life?
Yes. What do you think I want out of life?
Okay, let me give the intellectual, I'll get points later, Lonnie answer.
Just give the answer
Okay.
you think you need.
So what I think you want out of life is fulfillment in not just your career or vocation, but you also want fulfillment in the sense of fulfillment as a wife, as a mother, as a woman, and you want to feel a sense of significance, purpose, and accomplishment. If you tell me I'm wrong, then God gonna strike you down. So
Jeez.
no, because okay. That's not violent. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, but
Okay.
you didn't have to give the that.
Okay, I just didn't want you to be
Jeez.
like, no, you're wrong. Okay, I'm just saying.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. What do you think would help improve our relationship?
What do I think would help improve our relationship? Better, consistent and better communication.
Okay.
The ability to remain transparent without a sense of wondering what the other person will think or say. And then just keeping it 100, more jiggy. She chuckled because she know what jiggy is. Y'all jokers don't know what jiggy is, but for the sake of the fact that there may be some underage jokers listening in when they ain't supposed to, hunching.
Okay, that's the worst word ever.
Okay.
I hate that word.
You don't even know what it means.
I do know.
You're not even
Why
from a
don't
place.
why
Y'all
don't
don't
we
even
just
use
say sexual intimacy? That's what
How you
you
know?
need to
How you
say.
know? How you know?
That's
if I
what
want
jiggy
that?
means. That's the definition of jiggy. Is that it's not hunching or whatever. That sounds so
How you know?
unattractive.
See, wait. I thought we were supposed to be keeping it real. How you know if I don't want to hunch?
I got a hunch that sounds nasty.
Okay. Well,
I
I
got
know
a
we
hunch.
married every once in a while.
Okay.
Okay, never mind. She don't want to. We're gonna go ahead and transition because Kara, she gets nervous whenever.
I don't get nervous. I'm just
when we bring
saying.
up her fast ways.
What? I am okay.
Okay, never mind. Here comes daffodils.
Right. Boundaries. Isn't this supposed to be about boundaries? You're crossing a boundary.
Sorry, Kara. I do apologize for
Yeah.
my daffodillery.
Okay. Daffodil these.
Oh, see? Okay, all right. Moving right along. So see? Y'all, okay. All right, I'm gonna let that slide. But talking about boundaries in marriage and just boundaries in relationship as well. What I want to do now, I want to kind of pivot and transition and talk about boundaries as far as family boundaries.
Yeah, that's good.
Boundaries when it comes to family.
Yeah.
Kara and I come from completely different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say polar opposite different, now of course we do share a lot of things in common when it comes to family, as far as family values and things like that. But as far as types of families,
Yeah, it's like Good Times in the Cosby Show.
Oh really? Okay.
I mean,
okay. So who's the good times? Yeah, let's just go ahead and
let's just be.
okay. All right. See.
I
All right.
mean,
daffodils. Oh, Claire Huxtable over here.
I don't mind. I like Felicia
Okay.
Rashad.
Anyway, but no, we come
great.
from two different two different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I mean, completely different.
Opposites.
And one thing I want to make very clear: just because it's different doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
No, exactly.
I love my in-laws. I
Yeah.
mean, my in-laws are, man, I got lucky. God bless me.
Yeah. And
Because
they love you too.
my in-laws are the bomb.com. Now,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I have some friends
Yeah.
and we know some couples that we communicate with who can't say the same thing. And,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's very unfortunate. But
Yeah.
for me, I have been blessed with some great in-laws.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, I know your parents have passed away, but I had a really good relationship with your mom. Loved her to death, and she loved us. She loved our relationship, and she respected our relationship. And I think you're talking about boundaries, and coming from different families. Yeah, we had truly different family upbringing, our environments, how we were raised. It was different, you know.
Right.
And so, but we had very similarities when it came to family and the
Yes.
love of family and community and connection, all of those things, and God-centered, you know, all of
Right.
those things were very similar, but how we grew up was totally different.
Yeah, completely
Totally
different.
different.
And let me explain what I mean by completely different. Of course, Kara grew up with both parents in her household. Her parents were married. In fact, they're still married.
Yeah.
They're going on 50 years of marriage. Or
Oh,
they're
beyond. They got married in 1950.
Okay.
So
they're going on 70.
No, that's not right.
No.
1950. They were born in 1950. They got married in 1970.
Okay.
So they're going on about 55 years of marriage.
55 years of marriage.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kara came up in a two-parent household.
Yeah.
Of course, I was raised by a single mother. And I grew up in a family where marriage was rare.
Yeah.
Very rare. In fact, marriage was not necessarily a thing that was goals.
Right.
Marriage was not goals when in my upbringing. In fact, we had blended families. We had single parent families. We had families who had families elsewhere.
Yeah,
And so marriage
side families.
was not a thing. But
Yeah, and marriage was a thing in ours. I mean, I think about grandparents were married for years
yes.
on both sides, you know, and uncles and aunts were married, you know what I mean? And so
Right.
it was very uncommon when you saw an uncle and aunt that got divorced. It was like, what is going on? That just does not happen. Now, just because they're married doesn't mean they were all happily married. I
Right.
think that's important because some people, they think the goal is to be married, but you want to be married. It's not all about just the title or the title of marriage, husband and wife. But yeah, we grew up and people were married. It was uncommon for people not to be married.
Right.
Yeah.
And that being said, so when Kara and I started dating in college, and I don't know if I ever shared this. I think I may have told you this. Marriage was my goal. I wanted to be married. In fact, I remember saying to myself, I want to have a wife by the time I'm 21 years old.
Yeah.
That was a personal goal of mine. I love the idea of having a wife or being married. Now, that was my desire. However, after going through life and reaching certain levels of maturity,
Yeah.
I realized that although I had a desire for that,
Yeah.
I did not have a healthy structure of what that looked like or what that entailed. And so,
Yeah.
unfortunately, through tests, trials, bumps and bruises, detours and roadblocks, I made some terrible decisions.
Yeah.
And they were detrimental to our marriage, but that did not take away the fact that I wanted to be a husband. I wanted to have a family at a very young age, and so we entered into marriage from two different perspectives.
Yeah.
Two different ideas of marriage, where Kara saw what a healthy marriage looked like growing up, and I, on the other hand, saw it from a distance. In fact, the only healthy marriage that comes to mind that I saw was my pastor and his wife. In fact, shout out to Ron Venners Sr. and Mama Daryl Venners.
Yep.
And they are to this day staples in our marriage,
Yeah.
who are very encouraging. We consider it an honor to serve under them, and they were a healthy image of marriage for me. That was like the only one that I saw.
Yeah.
But there was no excuse.
Yeah.
I think what happens is a lot of people use the excuse of, well, I didn't grow up with a 2-parent household. I
Right.
didn't grow up with this with the father in my life. What the Bible says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. There comes a point in every adult's life where they have to give up those old childish or childlike immature excuses. And it doesn't matter where you started from, it matters where you finish. I believe that.
I believe that
and
too.
so, but yeah, so two different backgrounds, but talking about boundaries in family. That can be a touchy subject for a lot of people
Yep.
because you have a lot of family members who allow family members to get in their business.
Yeah.
Then you have some family members that don't allow anybody to get in their business.
Right.
And not saying one is right, not saying one is wrong. I can only speak from our experience.
Yeah.
And I have seen how bad it could be.
Yeah.
In fact, I've seen newlywed couples
Yeah.
make the big mistake of, whether that's the wife or the husband, telling their parents, their mom and dad, about what the husband or what the wife did. And that is rule number one.
Yeah.
Don't always bring everybody or family into your marriage bed or your marriage business.
Right.
What do you say?
I think that's a good point because just by natural relationship, your family is probably going to side, if they're picking sides, they're going to pick blood.
Right.
It's just naturally they're going to pick blood. So if I'm sharing things of what Lonnie did or he didn't do or whatever, and I'm complaining, whatever, and I'm sharing that with my family, they're naturally, just by affinity and connection, they're going to pick, it's just, they're going to pick the
Right.
blood member,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It just, and then say something, a petty argument or a petty disagreement or whatever. Well, now Lonnie and I, we've reconciled, we've like, okay, watered under the bridge, let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
But that's still going to keep a level of, I remember this
Right.
with the family member. Now, I think one of the things is important is, a disclaimer here is, it is okay to share things when it's something that's of detriment and a safety
Exactly.
issue, right?
Exactly.
So if there's something that's happening that's really harmful, you do need to let somebody know, because you
Yes.
shouldn't just be sitting in silence.
That's
and
exactly right. Yeah.
But most of the time, I would say 9 times out of 10, it's probably 9.5 times out of 10, it's probably nothing that is of harm, of danger emotionally or physically.
Right.
It's just, you don't like how he's not making the bed, or he put the stuff over there, or he's always asking about this type of food, or he's demanding, just
Right.
basic stuff like that. That is like literally, you should be able to work those things out.
Yeah, exactly.
You should be able to work those things out without having a mediator or somebody jumping in. The problem that happens is when you don't have boundaries, and now you just openly share stuff all the time, now they feel like they're part of the equation.
That's right.
Right? So now it's no longer you, your spouse, and hopefully God. Is you, your spouse, God, and mama and them, or all your cousins. So now it's just like you got all these voices that are trying to tell you what to do and what not to do, right? And then it becomes even more of a conflict. It's already hard enough to have boundaries with one another, then you adding other people into your relationship.
Now that brings me to one a funny point, actually. I remember earlier in our marriage, Kara and I we were ready to call it quits.
Yeah.
I don't even know what happened, but we were at odds with each other. I packed my stuff in my car. I drove. We were living in Broken Arrow at the time, or Tulsa.
Broken Arrow. So
Okay.
yeah, that was really early. In
So
the
we were
marriage,
living in Broken Arrow at the time.
probably year 2 or 3. I mean, it was early.
I don't know what year it was.
Yeah, it was
However, I packed my stuff in my car. I drove to Muskogee. My mama was living on Garland at the time. And so I had my stuff in my car, and me being a mama's boy, I said, my mama gonna ride or die for me. You know, I was like, I'm gonna tell her right now, things are not going good at home. I'm gonna stay here for a little while, you know, till things smooth over, till we figure out what we gonna do. So I grabbed all my stuff, loaded it in the house, put it in the garage, and she looked at me like, what are you doing? I said, I'm just gonna come stay here for a few days because right now things are rocky between me and Kara. She said, you not staying here? Now I looked at her like, what do you mean I'm not staying here? My mama was dead serious. My mama was standing on business, 10 toes down, saying, you not staying here? You go back home and you fix that. My mama sent me back home
with your trash bags, because that's all you had. Some backpacks and some trash bags. And so
my mom showed me something early in our marriage that I will never forget this lesson. Even though my mama was never married, my mom understood something that I didn't know at that time in my life. And that's creating boundaries that number one, you don't bring your family in your business as a marriage. But number two is, marriage is for better or for worse, richer or poor, till death do you part. She said, you're not staying here. You're going to go back home and you're going to fix what you broke. Or gave me the idea that I don't care how bad it get between you and her, I'm not taking your side. I'm not gonna be an enabler for you.
She wasn't gonna co-sign that.
Yeah. And so I learned that early. So as our marriage progressed, I knew I couldn't go to my mama. Even when I was right or wrong, I knew I couldn't go to my mama to take sides. She was not going to do it. And so what happens is in marriage, not just even in marriage, but in relationships, people look for a co-signer for a lot of times for their foolishness, because they don't always go to get support for whenever they are in the wrong. It's just when they want to be right. And so that's a very, very, very big mistake to make, is whenever you allow family members to get in your business. Now, as the black culture, African American culture, growing up in black households, y'all know the saying goes, what goes on in this house stays in this house.
Yep, that's right.
That I don't, and I don't know about the Anglo-Saxon side or the Caucasian side or any other culture, no disrespect. I'm just telling you how I know, growing up in the black household, what goes on in this house stays in this house. But we've veered away from that mindset because now we have social media. We want to let everybody know what's going on, good or bad. You know, people want to post their nice vacations and all the things they're going. Nothing's wrong with that, but y'all already do post whenever you done lied to each other, or you done deceived each other, or you done spent a little extra money than you were supposed to. Y'all don't post that on social media. But it's important to be careful, set boundaries, healthy boundaries in your marriage and relationship that don't allow family or even friends or BFFs to get all up in your business, because like Kara just mentioned, you tell them something wrong that Jerome did, they're going to always have a grudge against him, even when he fixed what he made wrong. So that's why it's important to have healthy boundaries when it comes to family. Let's take it a step further. Not even just creating boundaries for whenever there's turmoil in your relationship, but creating boundaries when your kinfolk come to you for money. Now, we just had an episode about finances, but this is important. Whenever you have kinfolk that come to you and saying, hey, man, you know, I'm a little short on my...
Kinfolk means family, just in case.
I'm sorry. The word
know.
kinfolk is a colloquialism used, not even just in the African-American culture. There are other people who use it in that are countrified. So, kinfolk means your relatives. But where I'm from in Muskogee, everybody kinfolk. So they don't even have to be blood. Kinfolk is kinfolk. So... whenever kinfolk or your homies or your friends or family members come to you for assistance, and I've had it happen, too many times for me to count, where I have family members come to me because they're late or behind on a bill or short on rent, or can't pay for this or can't pay for that. It's been even times where I've had to help pay for funerals and so forth. Create healthy boundaries so that whenever they come to you, You can let them know, hey, let me talk to my husband, let me talk to my wife first.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, that's going to create a sense of resentment from your spouse and you, and that's going to create a rift, and there's not going to be harmony in the home.
Yeah, I think that's good. One thing you said, I'll go back to, you mentioned like having family members co-sign on your foolishness. So on the flip side, you need to, if you are going to leverage family or friends, you need them to co-sign on your accountability so that you can have that as healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So we're talking about healthy boundaries or just boundaries in relationships. Is an unhealthy boundary is having people that are co-signing on your foolishness, and that further allows you to, push the boundaries, right? But if you're going to leverage outside individuals, you need to have, if that person or people should be accountability.
Right.
So accountability is ones that's trying to tell you need to stay within your boundaries. Right? So that is healthy. And I think every relationship, as you think about relationships, but in the context of what we're talking about is marriage, is that if you are going to have outsiders, right? Outside of your spouse and yourself and God, that's going to help you keep boundaries or help you enforce boundaries or help you stay within your boundaries, having an accountability couple is really important. So that when they know what your boundaries are, there's some of the known boundaries or the unsaid boundaries, but they know like, okay, you probably don't need to be hanging out with all your single friends all the time. You shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should be hanging out with the couples, So an accountability partner say, hey, don't you probably need to be with your spouse on this? Or why are you hanging out here at the clubs? Or why are you hanging out at the bars? You're not that life anymore. That's not your life anymore. So I think it's the same thing as you said, is co-signers, which co-signers could be the ones that are co-signing on your foolishness, right? But think about accountability partners to help you stay in tune and stay locked in to those boundaries that you have said that are important to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, I want to share one other point before we wrap this thing up that just brought to mind self-governing boundaries. You have to create boundaries for yourself. I know we're talking about boundaries in relationships, boundaries in marriage, but you also have to learn to govern yourself accordingly. What does that look like? I'm glad you asked. I'll speak from a personal experience for myself. I used to deal with issues of dealing with, I'm just saying directly, I always had a problem with not creating friendships with the opposite sex. Although my mind was in the right place, I was naive to the fact of what trouble that could cause down the road, and not even taking into consideration the fact that it was disrespectful to Kara or what perception it was. So I had to, first of all, realize that, hey, this don't look good as a married man creating friendships with the opposite sex, especially without my wife's knowledge.
Right.
So I had to create boundaries in that regard. People would DM me all the time. Hey, Lonnie, I had a question. I need some relationship advice because my husband is doing it. I had to say, you know what? Hey, I don't know what to tell you. Let me talk to my wife. See if she'll reach out to you. So those DMs started to decrease and decrease. Not only that, learning not to find myself in places alone with females, creating space where if I'm meeting with a female, we're meeting in a public space. Now, I have not cut females off altogether. I'm not that naive. I've learned to govern myself, but Kara is aware of it. Also, another way of self-governing for me was communicating my every move. Now, this may sound like micromanagement, but Kara didn't ask that of me. I chose to do that myself. For example, if I go out of town, if I go back to the hometown of Muskogee, wherever I go, even here locally around Dallas, if I know I'm going to go somewhere, I'm saying, hey, look, here's where I'm going, Kara. Okay. Or if I'm getting ready to leave, I'm getting ready to leave. Or giving her my location on my phone so she'll know where I am, so that there is no, hey, where you been? Or why were you there this long? Communicating that. That's having self-governance, governing yourself accordingly to create self-boundaries so that you can prevent any wiggle room or whatsoever of unnecessary conflict or unnecessary drama.
That's good.
Yep.
That's good.
So, all right, so we're going to close this thing out. Do you have any final words for the people
Final words for the people. So, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for rocking with us. We are going to keep this in rotation. As we said in the first kickoff episode, we love to, keep it moving with different topics and thoughts. And so definitely let us know if there are certain topics you want us to hit upon. Mm-hmm. We're open book. We've been in relationships for a long time. We've been married for a long time. Mm-hmm. We've been in the space of just relationships. Mm-hmm. And so we definitely want to make sure this podcast is productive and fruitful, and it's practical. And so I think boundaries is important, whether it's your self-governing boundaries, whether it's boundaries within your relationship, boundaries that you set the line for your family and friends, boundaries whether you establish that with your work and other extracurricular activities. It's important to establish boundaries so that when you know you're outside the boundaries, you have a way of trying to govern yourself to get back within alignment. Relationships is not a one-sided type thing. You're in a relationship with other people. You're in a relationship with each other as your husband and wife. And so you want to be respectful of those boundaries because you want it to be a good relationship, right? Of mutual trust and mutual respect and love and kindness and, all of that. And having healthy boundaries keeps peace in your home.
That's true. That's true.
So if you want to protect your peace, right, your peace and the peace of your spouse, establish the boundaries and be respectful to keep those boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next week.
See ya.
Can we be real?